The ice is disappearing. The maps are changing, and the balance of power is shifting. What once seemed permanent is now melting away quietly, relentlessly, and with consequences far beyond the frozen horizon. For centuries, vast sheets of ice acted as natural barriers, sealing off oceans, protecting borders, and limiting human ambition. These frozen regions were considered the edges of the world, hostile, inaccessible, and strategically irrelevant. But history shows us that when barriers fall, competition follows. As global temperatures rise, polar ice is retreating at unprecedented speeds. New sea routes are emerging where none existed before. Journeys that once took weeks around entire continents can now be shortened dramatically. Trade, energy, transport, and naval movement are being reimagined in real time. Beneath the melting ice lies more than water. Vast reserves of oil, gas, minerals, and rare earth elements are becoming accessible for the first time. Resources that were once unreachable are now within grasp, turning frozen wilderness into zones of economic promise and political tension. This transformation is forcing major powers to rethink their strategies. Military presence is expanding into colder regions. Icebreakers are no longer tools of exploration alone, but symbols of influence and preparedness. Scientific research stations now sit alongside strategic infrastructure, blurring the line between cooperation and competition. History teaches a clear lesson. When new routes open and resources emerge, rivalry intensifies. The age of exploration, the scramble for colonies, and the race for oil in the 20th century all followed this pattern. Today, climate change is accelerating history rather than creating something entirely new. Yet this moment is different. The melting ice is not the result of discovery or conquest. It is the consequence of human activity itself. The very forces driving competition are also destabilizing ecosystems, threatening coastal populations, and amplifying global risk. The world now faces a paradox. The same melting ice that promises economic opportunity also demands unprecedented cooperation. Decisions made in these newly accessible regions will shape trade, security, and environmental stability for generations. The ice is melting, power is on the move, and history is unfolding faster than ever before. What happens next will depend not only on who arrives first, but on whether competition or cooperation defines this new chapter of the global story. Climate change as a strategic force. Climate change has transformed from a purely scientific or environmental concern into a powerful strategic force, shaping global politics and security. Among its most visible impacts is the rapid melting of polar ice, a development that is fundamentally altering how nations think about trade, military power, and access to resources. What was once frozen, distant, and strategically irrelevant is now emerging as a central arena of global competition. As polar ice retreats, new maritime trade routes are opening across the Arctic. These passages dramatically shorten travel distances between major economic centers in North America, Europe, and Asia, reducing shipping time, fuel costs, and logistical risk. Control over these routes carries enormous economic value, giving states that can navigate and secure them a significant advantage in global trade. History has shown that whoever controls the fastest and safest trade corridors often gains lasting influence over the international system. Beyond trade, melting ice is reshaping military planning. Regions that were once naturally protected by extreme cold are now becoming accessible for year-round operations. This has prompted major powers to expand their naval capabilities, invest in ice-capable vessels, and establish a permanent presence in polar regions. Surveillance systems, military bases, and rapid response forces are increasingly oriented toward these newly exposed frontiers. Climate change, in essence, is altering the geography of defense itself. Perhaps most consequential is access to untapped natural resources. Beneath the polar ice lie vast reserves of oil, natural gas, minerals, and rare earth elements, resources essential to modern economies and advanced technologies. As extraction becomes feasible, competition intensifies over who has the legal, economic, and physical ability to exploit these assets. Energy security, industrial growth, and technological dominance are now linked directly to environmental change. In this way, climate change acts as a strategic multiplier. It accelerates existing rivalries, creates new zones of competition, and forces nations to adapt their long-term plans. The melting ice is not merely a symbol of environmental loss. It's a catalyst reshaping power, strategy, and the future balance of the world. Geography. Rewriting power dynamics. Geography has always shaped the rise and fall of power. Mountains have protected empires, oceans have enabled trade and conquest, and deserts have isolated civilizations. Today, climate change is quietly rewriting geography itself. As polar ice retreats, regions once sealed by nature are opening, transforming remote and frozen frontiers into active zones of strategic competition among powerful states. For centuries, ice functioned as a natural barrier limiting movement, preventing settlement and discouraging sustained military or economic activity. The Arctic and other polar regions were seen as empty spaces on the map, significant mainly to scientists and explorers. That perception is now rapidly changing. Melting ice is converting these areas from geographical dead ends into gateways, connecting continents, oceans, and markets. This shift is altering global power dynamics. New sea routes reduce dependence on traditional choke points, such as canals and narrow straits, reshaping patterns of trade and influence. States positioned closest to these emerging corridors gain geographic advantages, while others must adapt or risk strategic marginalization. Geography, once stable for generations, is becoming fluid and power is adjusting accordingly. At the same time, newly accessible land and seabeds are redefining territorial competition. Questions of sovereignty, maritime boundaries, and exclusive economic zones are becoming increasingly urgent. Regions that were once uncontested due to inaccessibility are now subject to legal claims. Infrastructure, development, and strategic positioning. Maps are being reinterpreted, treaties re-examined, and international law tested by environmental change. This transformation also elevates the importance of presence. Establishing ports, research stations, communication networks, and transport hubs in these regions is no longer symbolic, it is strategic. Physical presence signals influence, capability, and long-term intent. Geography is no longer just a backdrop to power. It is an active force shaping decisions and rivalries. History shows that when geography changes, power follows. The retreat of ice is doing more than revealing land and water. It is exposing new fault lines in the global order. In this emerging landscape, geography is not merely being discovered again. It is being rewritten, with lasting consequences for international competition and cooperation. History repeating under new conditions. History rarely repeats itself in the same form, but it often follows familiar patterns. Across centuries, shifts in geography, resources, and access have repeatedly triggered competition among rising and established powers. From the opening of new trade routes to the discovery of valuable resources, moments of geographic change have consistently reshaped global rivalries. Today, climate change is accelerating this historical pattern, compressing centuries of gradual transformation into mere decades. In the past, natural changes or technological breakthroughs altered the strategic map. The opening of maritime routes connected distant continents and ignited competition for ports and sea lanes. The discovery of gold, spices, and later oil transformed remote regions into centers of global rivalry. Control over these resources did not merely bring wealth. It brought political influence, military strength, and long-term dominance. Each time geography shifted, power followed and conflict often followed power. What makes the current moment unique is speed. Climate change is not slowly redrawing the map over generations. It is reshaping it within a single lifetime. Melting ice, rising seas, and shifting ecosystems are opening new routes and revealing resources at a pace that political systems struggle to manage. States are forced to react quickly, often without clear rules or precedents, increasing the risk of miscalculation and tension. The conditions have also changed. In earlier eras, competition unfolded in a world with fewer actors and limited global interdependence. Today's rivalries play out in a deeply connected international system, where economic disruption, environmental damage, and military escalation ripple across borders instantly. A dispute over resources in a remote region can affect energy prices, supply chains, and diplomatic relationships worldwide. Another critical difference lies in responsibility. Past rivalries were driven by discovery or conquest. Today's are driven by environmental transformation caused largely by human activity. The same industrial growth that powered global development is now altering the planet itself. As a result, nations are not only competing over new opportunities, but also managing shared risks, from environmental collapse to humanitarian crises. Despite these differences, the underlying pattern remains familiar. When access expands and resources emerge, strategic rivalry intensifies. Climate change is acting as a historical accelerator, reviving old dynamics under new conditions. The challenge for the modern world is whether it can learn from history, recognizing the pattern early enough to prevent competition from turning into conflict. The past offers warnings, but the future depends on how those lessons are applied in an era where geography itself is no longer fixed.